Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome back to the JoshCast for episode 5, the podcast that believes that Andrew Garfield is and always will be the greatest Spider-Man. I'm your host, Josh, and as you can probably imagine, today I want to talk about the new Spider-Man movie, Spiderman No Way Home, which released this last Friday as of this podcast coming out on Sunday, and I wanted to talk about it because I went and saw it yesterday on Saturday, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was a great time. And there were a couple points, I guess more than a couple, but I wanted to talk about and just lay out my thoughts on this movie, the good and the bad. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the villains. I loved the large roster of villains that they brought back. They brought back Lizard and Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man. And then from the original Spider-Man trilogy, they brought back Sandman, Doc Ock, and Green Goblin. And I was really hoping, I'm not going to lie, I was really hoping Venom was going to turn up at one point, because for those of you who have seen the new Venom movie, Let There Be Carnage, at the post-credit scene, they're like warped to the different universe, and they just turn up in some guy's house, and I was like, oh man, Venom's going to show up in No Way Home. And what I was hoping for with Venom is that he would turn up and help Spider-Man and Doc Ock and everybody kind of fight the others, because I thought what this movie was going to do is it was going to like divide the villains and have them kind of fight each other with Spider-Man, those who are with Team Spider-Man, those who are against them. And my early prediction was it was going to be Doc Ock and Sandman teaming up with Tom Holland to fight Lizard, Goblin, and Electro. That was my thought, but that didn't really happen. Also, I should probably mention that there are spoilers. I should have said that at the beginning, but it will definitely be in the title and the thumbnail. So if you've already heard all that and you just got spoiled for what I said was already in the trailer, because I haven't really gotten into spoilers, well, that's on you. So I really like how they brought back all these villains. And one thing that I really liked is the way they handled the villains. Like, for example, Lizard and Sandman, they are not really fan favorites, I'd say, from their movies. And so when they came back, they kind of took a back seat, but they still gave them lines, and they still were involved a little bit, but they weren't like a main focal point of the plot. And that was nice because it gave more time in the spotlight for Doc Ock, Green Goblin, and Electro, and those actors whose names I'm totally spacing on. I'm just going to refer to them as their villain name just for the sake of clarity, and I'm not making any confusion for anybody who might not know. But those three took the main spotlight for the villains, and God, they were incredible with it. Especially the Green Goblin, I believe William Dafoe, right? That's who plays him. He was incredible in this movie. He really brought back Green Goblin for me. And Goblin for me was one of my favorite villains in the originals. Him and Doc Ock, obviously, so seeing these two come back was great. But one thing that I really liked was how they kind of redeemed Doc Ock. Like, Tom Holland fixes his chip that gives him control of his arms again, and he becomes like peaceful again, I should say, and he like starts helping Spider-Man. But as soon as like everything goes to shit in the apartment building and everybody takes off, Doc Ock just kind of disappears, really. Even though he's on Team Spider-Man's side, he just kind of vanishes for a while, and I don't understand why or where he went. Like, it shows him leaving, but he just disappears. And he comes back at the perfect moment to save Spider-Man, right? But, yeah, I really like to know why he disappeared. But I really like how they redeemed Doc Ock in this, and how they, like, gave him a proper arc instead of just watching him drown again. And I really like also how the movie brings up that these guys all die in their timelines, and everybody's like, well, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. I don't want to go back and die. And that's their main motive, to not want to go back, and why they want to take back that random Allspark box and destroy it, just so they don't have to go back, which works. It worked great for the movie. And like I just said, the Allspark, the cube thing, just gave me Allspark vibes from Transformers. I don't know why. The whole time they're trying to get the box, I just imagine them saying in the Megatron voice, like, "Give me the cube, boy." You know, I got some random laughs out of that in moments that weren't really funny at all, just because I had that stupid ass image in my head. But yeah, the villains were great. They were handled very well. There was a problem that I had with this movie, though, with them, was that at the beginning of the fight, it shows like the villains just kicking ass, taking names and whatnot, and you're like, oh god, how are they gonna get out of this, right? And then there's just this montage where everything just starts going right. Like, they beat just about every villain just by like injecting them with this thing, or blowing something up, or gassing them with something that takes away their powers. And it just kind of happens like minutes between villains in like this montage, and it just felt too easy, because they're addressing like issues around the villains that the Spider-Man and the other universes like struggled with, like how to cure the lizard or how to fix Sandman and whatnot. And they just solved this all in the span of a few minutes, just really conveniently. They just happened to make the antidotes for all their powers, or the solutions, and then they just beat them all one by one. It felt like cheap. It didn't really felt like they win, because whenever they would like take away somebody's power, it was right in the middle of them getting their asses kicked. So it's like, oh, I'm losing this fight horribly. Like, Electro's kicking our ass. Oh, yeah, he just lost his power. Yep. All right, we won that. All right, next villain. It worked like that. It didn't feel earned, you know? And especially because there's the one scene after Tom Holland fights Goblin, and he's like, man, I think I broke my ribs. Like, he's beat up, but then when he gets to the tower, he's like fine again. Like, he's not sluggish. He's just ready to go. Like, nothing happened. I get there's like some superpower bullshit or whatever behind that, but they just like forgot about it, I guess, and it just felt a little lazy. The final fight, though, was really badass, though, and just the way that they fought and the way they ended it just didn't feel earned. I felt like they could have gone on a lot longer. It was as if the movie makers were like, oh shit, we're running low on time, we gotta end this, or we're running low on budget, we gotta end this, and they just ended it. And the other issue that I had with the end of the movie was how Strange fixes everything. Like, it shows like the tears in fabric and space-time and whatnot, and everybody's starting to come through, and Tom Holland's just like, well, what if you just do the spell again that makes everybody forget I'm Spider-Man? Will that fix everything? And Strange is like, yeah, it would, but I don't want to do that for some reason. But Strange was the one who like adamantly wanted to run that spell and just get rid of everything. And that's not an issue that I have really, but it just fixes everything. Like, Strange just does the spell when he's like struggling to keep everybody in the other universes from coming through. He does the spell, and then it just fixes everything. Just like that. Problem solved. Let's go home, boys. We did it. And it just felt out of nowhere, and it didn't work for me. It just felt like a cheap cop-out. Like, oh yeah, we have this answer the whole time. And what I felt could have made the movie work better like that is if the box was actually destroyed. You know, because there's like the box and there's the button on it that immediately sends everybody home. But Tom Holland insisted on like taking away everybody's powers and saving them because he didn't want them to go home and die in their own universes, so they didn't press the box button. But I think the movie would have worked better if that box was destroyed at one point. Like, the villains actually got it, and then it became our only option now is to take away their powers and save everybody. That's just me, though. Let me know what you guys think about that below. I guess I'm going to talk about the big thing now that I guess everybody was talking about from the minute this movie was announced, was whether or not Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire were going to be coming back. And I talk about this because, in my opinion, this was the worst kept secret in the entire movie. Like, everybody and their mother knew that Tobey and Andrew would be coming back for this. Like, as soon as we learned that they brought back the old actors for the villains, mainly Doc Ock and Goblin, but they bring them back, and then everybody's like, oh yeah, they have to be here. Like, they came through a time portal or whatever and came through. So how did the Spider-Man not end up showing up also, right? So obviously, spoiler alert, Andrew and Tobey make it in as their Spider-Man. And there's a moment in the movie that I really liked. It was when they were talking on top of the building, the three of them, and Tom Holland Spider-Man was really upset about Aunt May dying, and they were like, hey man, we feel your pain, we know what you've been through, because we are you. And then Tobey and Andrew Spider-Man start talking about like how they lost someone that they really care about. Like, Tobey talked about his Spider-Man losing his Uncle Ben and how it was his fault, and he felt guilty about it, and he wanted to kill the person that did it, and it didn't make him feel better and whatnot. And Andrew mentioned that he lost Gwen, or Tom's MJ, and oh god, the emotion on their faces, they're just talking about it, man. It was a heartbreaker, man. That was an emotional scene of just them like telling Tom Holland Spider-Man, like, hey, we know what you're going through, man. And oh my god, yeah, that was an emotional scene, and it was very well done. And then also later in the movie, when Tom Holland's MJ is falling from the building, and then Andrew Garfield swoops in and saves her, and he lands with her on the ground, and he just looks at her and he starts getting really emotional, and you're like, oh man, he's going back to how he couldn't catch Gwen in The Amazing Spider-Man. He's just having a moment, and even MJ's like, yo, are you good? And he's just like holding it back. He's like, yeah, I'm good. Oh my god, the feels, man. Personally, I really like the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I know that's a controversial take, but just that callback, just that they didn't even have to say it. You just knew. Anyone who's seen the movie knew why he was getting emotional after that catch. And oh yeah. And speaking of callbacks, there was a lot of them in this. Like, they had William Dafoe say, I'm somewhat of a scientist myself and whatnot. There was so many callbacks and quotes from the other two series, the other two universes, but they didn't do it in a way that felt, I guess, forced. They like worked it in on their own, and they delivered the line, and they moved on from it, and it was just a great little fan service that really didn't steer the plot away from where it was going, and I really loved that. But I will say there were a few missed opportunities that I were really hoping for. The main one that I was hoping for is when the three Spider-Man were all together, they would have done like the Spider-Man meme where they all pointed at each other and be like, wait a minute, like that meme that everybody sees. I was really hoping for that to be in the movie, but unfortunately it wasn't. But oh my god, yeah. But overall, the Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire being back was the worst kept secret of this movie. Like, they kept trying to play it off like, no, they're not in here, like trying to play it off, but everybody knew. Like, everybody. I don't think anybody was really surprised that they were in. But even in the theater that I was in, when like Ned opens the portal and Andrew Garfield jumps through and he's like, hey everybody, like the theater still lost it. Like, everybody started cheering. I was like, yes, there he is. I knew it. I was like having that Thor moment in Endgame where he's like, I knew it, when Cap lifts the hammer. And then they do the same thing, and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man jumps through, and they're like all together again. And then they get the big reunion with Tom when he's mourning. But yeah, I personally, I wasn't a big fan of the reveal of them. I thought it could have been more epic instead of just like one of them walking to the portal and jumping through. It was still cool, don't get me wrong, but it could have been like way better. Like, when I saw the trailer, in one of the trailers it showed MJ falling from a building. And my initial prediction was, oh, that's going to be Andrew Garfield's reveal. He's going to swoop in, catch MJ, and that's going to be his big thing. Like, that's how he shows up to the fight. Like, he was following Lizard and Electro or something. And he swoops in, saves her, and then he has his moment. I technically was correct. He did swoop in and save MJ, but it wasn't for his reveal. And that was disappointing. Instead of just him kind of jockeying over to the portal and jumping through, which is still cool. Don't get me wrong, that was still cool. But if his reveal was saving MJ, oh my God, the theater would have lost their minds. I would have lost my mind in the theater, and I'm a pretty quiet movie watcher. As for how I would have introduced Tobey Maguire back into the movie, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, maybe he could have like saved May or something in Tom Holland when he's fighting Goblin. Like, he turns up in the Goblin fight and saves her. But I don't know. I didn't really put much thought into how they could have revealed Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man back in. But I felt like each of them should have had like a surprise, I'm back, bitches kind of moment where they all turn up and have their grand entrance instead of what they did. But it was still good. Like, it could have been way worse the way they introduced them. But it still, for me, left a lot to be desired. The next thing that I want to talk about, speaking of Ned and portals, was the part of the movie where Strange is trapped in the mirrored dimension after somehow losing to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which I don't think would ever happen in a one-on-one. I think Strange would smoke him. But I guess for plot convenience, Tom Holland had to win that fight. But Ned picks up like his ring, and then he can like start making portals with it, which was pretty interesting. But one thing that I really liked about Ned and making these portals and having that ring was that he was really bad at it, right? My fear with when Ned picked up the ring, he put it on, and he accidentally made a portal. My fear with that was that it was going to be he's a prodigy kind of thing, and he's going to be like the next big wizard, and he's going to be able to do all these crazy things his first time wearing the ring. He's going to be like a Rey Skywalker, Mary Sue type of character with this ring, but he wasn't. He was really bad at it. Like, he could open a portal, but he like really struggled with it, and he never figured out how to close the portal, which helped like the Lizard jump through and find them when they were hiding in the box and whatnot. And I really liked how bad Ned was with the ring. I don't have a problem with him being able to use the ring. I think it's funny. It worked. It didn't like make the movie worse. It made it better in my opinion. But I really liked how he wasn't a prodigy with it. He was really bad at it. He could open a portal after many attempts, but he didn't know how to close it and whatnot. And then there's the scene towards the end where he like floats down with Strange's cape, and he has like that weird wizard moment that definitely looks really fake. It looks really out of place, but it's funny just because Ned just floating down in the cape. I don't know if that's foreshadowing and whatnot. It felt like there might have been a little foreshadowing there, but there was also in the movie where Strange acknowledged that Ned used the ring, and he opened the portal that let Strange out of the mirror dimension, and Strange is like, oh, okay, whatever, and just leaves after taking his ring back and whatnot. So Strange didn't have this, whoa, you're a wizard also, I should teach you and whatnot. He was just like, bitch, give me my ring back and get the fuck out of the way. I got work to do. I gotta go beat the shit out of a kid that just locked me in a different dimension. But it was a nice touch to the movie, and it made Ned feel more involved with the plot. Because that was kind of my issue with the last Spider-Man movie, was that Ned wasn't really involved a whole lot. Like in the first one, he was the guy in the chair. He was involved. He was doing lots, and he was funnier in hell in that movie, in the first one. But in the second one, he didn't really do a whole lot. But in this one, he actually was a lot more involved. Him and MJ or Zendaya, whatever. And so those two are a lot more involved, and I really like that. Those two and their chemistry with Tom Holland, that trio really works for this movie. And that kind of plays into the next thing I wanted to talk about, is how the movie kind of plays around their friendship and their relationship with one another, how they all want to go to college together and whatnot, and all that. And like all of Tom Holland's decisions revolve around them being together, and him wanting them to remember that he's Spider-Man causes everything to go wrong and whatnot. It plays off of those three, and they don't just like move them aside when shit hits the fan in this movie. They keep them involved with the movie, and I really appreciate that, instead of just using them as a way to get the plot moving. So yeah, seeing them involved was awesome. It worked great. It made the movie so much better than if they just kind of stood on the sideline and just watched in horror as everything happened and whatnot, like a typical side character would. But no, these guys were involved. Even in the final fight, they were busy, and they kept the plot moving instead of, just pissing off. The next thing that I wanted to address was the death of May. And I'm actually kind of torn on how I feel in this moment. One thing that I really respected about the first movie in this trilogy was that they skipped over the usual how Peter gets bit by a spider and Uncle Ben dies, the usual origin story of Spider-Man. They skipped that in the first one because everybody knew it. But in this one, they killed off Aunt May in an Uncle Ben style fashion, and they gave her the line of, with great power comes great responsibility and whatnot. They gave her an Uncle Ben death. And it didn't feel necessary. Emotionally, it didn't really hit me. It felt a little dragged out, her death, in my opinion. And then they cut away to a different mood change when the scene changes. And it doesn't really let it sink in until Toby and Andrew find Tom Holland Spider-Man. And they're like comforting him with the scene that I really loved, with my favorite scene in the whole movie, actually. But her death it didn't need to happen, I guess. And it wasn't really done like very well. It was done good, I guess, because it did set up Tom Holland to be emotional and whatnot. You can understand it. But it felt a little dragged out. It didn't need to happen. And they just felt like they had to shoehorn in an Uncle Ben moment. And I don't get that. Honestly, I thought they were going to kill off one of like Tom Holland's friends, either Ned or MJ. I thought they were going to kill off one of them. I didn't have any evidence to suggest that. It was just a gut feeling. I knew they were probably going to kill somebody off in this, but I didn't know who. I didn't think it would be May. And if they did kill May, I wouldn't have guessed that they would have given it an Uncle Ben style death. I don't know if I'm the only one who feels that way. Again, I'm torn on it. I don't outright hate it, and I don't outright love it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't really know how to feel on it, but it could have been a lot better. Again, those of you watching who have seen this movie, let me know what your thoughts on that were down below. But I can forgive that scene just because of how well the scenes where the three Spider-Man get together for the first time, where they're comforting Tom and whatnot. That scene was fucking brilliant. It was so well done. It was really emotional. Like, it got me a little emotional. I'm not going to lie. Just them, like I said earlier, them talking about how they lost Uncle Ben and Gwen and whatnot, respectively. Just, it hit hard. So, yeah, let me know what your thoughts are down below on that. And I will say that the end credit scene was interesting. For those of you who don't know, every Marvel movie has an end credit scene that sets up the next movie or a later movie, I guess. But it showed like Venom in the universe, like at a bar, and then he like disappears. But he leaves behind a piece of the symbiote that just sticks to the bar counter or whatnot. I don't know how that got there or whatever, but that was really cool. So it kind of sets up the fourth Spider-Man movie in this series to do something with Venom. And I'm really excited to see where they go with that. I love Venom. He's my favorite anti-hero. And I was really disappointed that he didn't turn up in the final fight. Because when I saw the Let There Be Carnage scene with them getting warped to the new universe, I thought that Venom was going to turn up during the final fight and save somebody. Like he was going to turn up in a heroic fashion when one of the Spider-Man's about to die, save them and be like, hey, we're here, bitches. Let's fuck shit up, you know? But it didn't do that. They missed a huge opportunity, I think, with that. But I can understand why they didn't want to do that with Venom in the movie, just because it was already so heavily loaded with villains that if they were to bring Venom in, they wouldn't really get to do a whole lot with him. And I can tell they wanted to save him for another movie when they can give him that screen time that people would want to see from him. Because if he turned up in that final fight and then left afterward, you know, he would have gotten less like screen time and less lines and whatnot than the Lizard and Sandman, which would have rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So all in all, I am happy, I guess, now that I think about it, that they didn't bring Venom in just for the final fight and then get rid of him, that they set him up to be in the next movie. And so I can really appreciate that now that I've thought on it. But during the movie and when I saw the end credits scene, I was like, man, they really missed an opportunity with this. But now I realize, like, you know, they're setting up something bigger. They're setting up something bigger. The last real point that I wanted to talk about with this movie is something that confuses me, I guess, the most on everything in this movie. It's the spell that Strange was going to do to help Spider-Man. In the beginning of the movie, and even in the trailer, the spell that Strange was doing was to make everybody forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. That was the spell. Like, everybody would still, I guess, know him, but nobody would remember that he's Spider-Man. And Tom Holland fucks up the ritual because he's like, oh, why can't so-and-so remember? Let so-and-so remember. And Strange is, like, adjusting the spell. And he's like, oh, God, this fucking kid. And he, like, the spell gets so fucked up and whatnot. You guys have seen the movie. You know how this works. Or just through the trailer, you can assume. It goes haywire. It goes all fucky. But what I don't get with the spell is when Strange does it at the very end to fix everything, the bullshit, plot convenient, whatever. But when he does it, nobody remembers Peter. Like, nobody remembers that he was Spider-Man. But I thought that was the main, like, thing that the spell was going to do. It was going to make sure that nobody remembers that he is Spider-Man. That was the point of the spell. But in the end of the movie, nobody even remembers him. Like, MJ doesn't know him, and not even Ned knows him, even though they were best friends before he got the powers. At least that's what the first movie made it out to be. But I guess the spell was different? This is what I'm saying. I'm confused on this, because he was supposed to just have everybody forget that he's Spider-Man. But everybody just forgot who he was. Like, oh, you're Peter Parker? Yeah, nice to meet you, kind of thing. And that was kind of frustrating, I guess, because it was supposed to be just everybody forgets that he's Spider-Man. So it's interesting, and it's going to make the next movie that they do, because they're going to do another movie. Like, I don't think anybody doubts that, but it's going to set up the next movie to be really interesting. And I'm really excited to see what all they do with Venom and how Tom Holland gets, like, I guess, reunited with MJ and Ned and all that. But it just, I don't get it. It didn't seem like it needed to happen. I can totally see everybody forgetting that he's Spider-Man, but everybody forgetting who he is. Like, even Happy forgot who he was. Like, there's the scene in the end where they're standing at the gravesite on the memorial, and they, like, say, like, oh, how did you know May? But Happy doesn't even remember him. Like, doesn't he remember he's Peter or anything? Nobody remembers him. Yeah, I don't get it. Somebody explain that to me, how that worked, because I thought the spell just was going to make everybody forget he was Spider-Man, but it made everybody forget who he was overall. But it was handled well in the end, and you could, like, see the internal sadness in Tom Holland's character as he's, like, rehearsing to talk to MJ again, but it just goes wrong and he bails on it. And yeah, it was a little heartbreaking. So they handled it well. I'm just confused on how all that worked. And one issue that I had with the movie, ever since the first trailer where Tom fucks up the spell, was why did he have to have Strange alter the spell to let people remember that he's Spider-Man? Like, he can easily just go and tell Ned, MJ, Aunt May, like, hey, I'm Spider-Man. Like, he can still go back and tell them again, even if they have their mind wiped. Like, it's not hard. Like, I don't know why he had to have the spell altered to do something that he could just verbally do himself. Like, that was a big problem that I had from the beginning of the movie. And the movie could have been a lot different if that's how it worked, but it didn't, because then we wouldn't really have a movie. But I'm glad that the movie, I guess, kind of made it worked. But it in the end, I felt like I was the only one who was like, why couldn't he just tell them to begin with? Like, why can't he just go back after everybody's forgotten, but still remember him and be like, hey, I'm Spider-Man, surprise. But I guess they could have fixed this in the beginning by changing the wording of when Strange is describing the spell to say, yeah, no, nobody's going to remember who you are. Like, you're going to be a stranger to everybody. Instead of having him say, the entire world's about to forget that you're Spider-Man. But what he should have said is, the entire world's going to forget who you are. Like, you're going to be a stranger to everybody. And then it would make sense, the ending and the spell and whatnot, and why Tom was so reluctant to have everybody forget him and why he wanted to alter the spell. Because he can't just go up to somebody that's never met him or think they never met him, say, hey, we're best friends, or hey, you and I dated. You know, that kind of thing. That would work. So it was just, I guess, a simple writing error that's confusing me on this, or maybe I just missed something. I'm going to have to watch this movie again, but I didn't think I missed anything, because I was thinking about that the whole movie and waiting for, like, an explanation, but it never really came. So, again, let me know what everybody thinks down below, what your thoughts on this was, and whatnot. But I still really enjoyed this movie. This was a great time. It was a great experience. I love that they brought all these villains back, and they brought back the original Spider-Man, and they showed respect to the other universes, and they let the characters blossom and really show off their unique Spider-Man traits that they brought to their roles. But yeah. Oh, also one thing I just remembered that I wanted to talk about was Andrew Garfield in this was fucking hilarious. Like, they really brought back his humor that he brought in The Amazing Spider-Man that I really liked. One of the reasons why he's my favorite Spider-Man is just because of that. But there's this one scene where they're on the Statue of Liberty place for the final fight, and they're like talking and whatnot. And then Andrew just immediately stops them, and he's like, hey, I love you guys. That gave me a good laugh in the movies. Just his lines, man. Andrew Garfield is so fucking funny as Spider-Man. Man, I hope he comes back. Because, like, they're setting up all the Marvel movies again. They're bringing in the new heroes and whatnot. And there's going to be, like, a big Endgame Infinity War style movie at some point that brings everybody together again. The huge crossover. We all know it's coming. And I really hope they bring back Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire for it also. Like, let them come back and even maybe bring in Miles Morales. Like, let him come in also. Like, I would pay, like, good money to see a movie like that. And I hope they come back. I think the well reception of them and how everybody was super happy to have them back just will motivate people to want them to come back. And I hope they make surprise appearances later in, like, a big climatic movie. And, yeah, I'm really hoping they come back. It's going to be great. I'm really happy that they came back in this. They were both incredible. And I'm really happy they didn't kill Tobey in this. I thought they were. I thought they were going to kill Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man off when Goblin stabbed him in the back. But I guess he didn't die. Like, he seemed fine. But there was the one scene where Andrew Garfield is holding up Tobey as they're, like, talking to him. Like, they're saying their goodbyes. And Andrew's like he looks at Tobey and he's like, you're in a lot of pain, aren't you? And Tobey's like, oh, yeah, I am. Oh, God. Yeah. Like I was saying, some of the lines in this movie are just fucking hilarious. This movie has some great humor to it, and that's what I've always liked about the Spider-Man movies, is that they've all got humor to them. But all in all, this movie was really good. I really enjoyed it. They did the villains justice. They let William Dafoe and everybody shine and did fan service to the fans of the other series, the other Spider-Man universes and whatnot, in it's a respectful way that everybody who is a fan of them could enjoy it. Because I'm not the biggest fan of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. They're great movies, don't get me wrong, but they're not my favorite. I guess I'm just nostalgic for the other ones. The original and the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I'm just nostalgic for them. That's just me, though. But even I could get into this, and they really did everybody justice. Like, this was written by people who knew the Spider-Man movies very well. And that's something that Marvel's always done well, in my opinion. They always do good at paying tribute and respect to the other characters that they might tie in from comics and whatnot. That's something they've always done well. That's never been a problem with them. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this movie. Let me know what you guys all think down below if you've seen this. Obviously, if you've made it this far, 1, you're awesome, and 2, you've probably seen this movie or you don't really care about spoilers. But let me know what you think down below. And that's all I've got for this one. Now, as far as channel news and updates, there is not going to be a podcast next Sunday or next weekend just because it's Christmas. I'm going to be out of town. I don't have time to record and edit this podcast and whatnot. I'm going to take the weekend off. I'm bulk recording videos, so you will have Fire Emblem, Sacred Stones, or Sacred Infinity Stones, I should say, through the weekend, but just no podcasts. That's it. And is there anything else? I don't think so. If there are, you can tune into the Fire Emblem series where I'll say it then, or you can wait for the next podcast. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to let me know what you think down below. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know what you want to see down below, and overall, just what your thoughts on this movie are. With that being said, I will talk to you all later. Have a nice day, and yeah, peace.